The radar screen flickered with 6 hostile contacts approaching at Mach 1.8, their heat signatures burning bright against the desert sky. In the cockpit of her F-22 Raptor, Captain Sarah Chen's hands moved with surgical precision across controls that most pilots still struggled to master. While her squadron mates had spent years learning to trust the computer's automated targeting systems, Sarah had done something different. She had memorized every page of the technical manuals they had laughed at her for reading. And now, 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert, those same manuals were about to save her life and rewrite the rules of aerial combat forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base buzzed with the kind of confidence that came from flying the world's most advanced fighter jet. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of 12 F-22 pilots as they settled into their seats, flight suits crisp and patches gleaming. At the front of the room, Colonel Marcus Rodriguez stood beside a projection screen displaying radar signatures and engagement protocols. The air smelled of strong coffee and that particular blend of jet fuel and desert heat that seemed to permeate everything at Nellis. Sarah Chen sat in the third row, a thick technical manual spread across her lap. The cover was worn from handling, its edges soft with age and use. Her fingers traced the diagrams of radar cross-sections and stealth geometries as Colonel Rodriguez began his presentation on advanced air-to-air combat scenarios. Around her, the other pilots leaned back in their chairs, some scrolling through tablets, others whispering about weekend plans. None of them had brought paper manuals to the briefing. "Today we're running a complex engagement scenario," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had flown combat missions over 3 different continents. 6 hostile aircraft, mixed threat environment, electronic countermeasures active. The objective is simple: neutralize all targets while maintaining stealth profile. Questions? Captain Jake Morrison raised his hand from the front row. His flight suit was tailored to fit perfectly, and his call sign Viper was embroidered in gold thread beneath his name patch. "Sir, are we using the standard automated targeting sequence or manual override?" Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Standard protocol, Morrison. Let the computer do what it does best. The F-22 systems are designed to handle multiple targets simultaneously. Trust the technology." Sarah looked up from her manual, her dark eyes scanning the projected radar display. Something about the engagement geometry bothered her. The hostile aircraft were arranged in a formation that reminded her of a specific tactical scenario she had studied in the Advanced Electronic Warfare Manual. She raised her hand slowly. "Captain Chen?" Rodriguez's voice held a note of mild impatience. Sarah was known for asking detailed questions that often derailed briefings into technical discussions. "Sir, regarding the enemy formation pattern," Sarah began, her voice steady but quiet. "According to the EW Manual, Section 12.7, this looks like a coordinated jamming setup. If they're using synchronized electronic countermeasures, our standard targeting computers might have difficulty maintaining lock-on." A ripple of suppressed laughter ran through the room. Captain Tommy Ace Williams, sitting 2 seats to Sarah's left, turned to his neighbor and whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "She's still reading those dusty old books like it's flight school." Morrison twisted in his seat to look back at Sarah. "Chen, the F-22's AN/APG-77 radar is specifically designed to burn through electronic jamming. That's why we have the most advanced avionics package in the world. You don't need to memorize some 20-year-old manual to fly this bird." Sarah's grip tightened slightly on her manual, but her expression remained neutral. "The manual I'm referencing was updated last year, sir. It covers scenarios where enemy aircraft use distributed jamming techniques that can overwhelm even advanced radar systems if the pilot relies solely on automated targeting. Captain Lisa, Phoenix Harper, one of only 3 women in the squadron, leaned forward with a smirk. Sarah, I appreciate the homework, but we're flying 5th-generation fighters, not museum pieces. The computer knows things you can't possibly calculate by hand. Rodriguez held up a hand to quiet the room. Chun, I understand your dedication to technical knowledge, but Morrison's right. The F-22 was designed to handle complex electronic warfare environments. Your job as a pilot is to fly the aircraft and let the systems do what they're programmed to do. Save the manual reading for ground school instructors. Sarah nodded once, closing her manual and placing it in her lap. Yes, sir. The briefing continued with Rodriguez explaining the specific flight paths, communication protocols, and engagement rules. Sarah listened intently, but her mind kept returning to the formation pattern displayed on the screen. She had seen this exact configuration in 3 different tactical studies, all of which emphasized the vulnerability of automated targeting systems when faced with coordinated electronic countermeasures. As the pilots filed out of the briefing room, Sarah lingered behind, studying the projection screen one more time. The hostile aircraft positions formed a perfect hexagonal pattern, each aircraft positioned to maximize the effectiveness of their electronic warfare systems. It was a textbook example of distributed jamming, designed specifically to confuse and overwhelm the kind of automated targeting systems that the F-22 relied upon. Still here, Chun. Morrison's voice carried a note of condescension as he paused in the doorway. Don't overthink it. The bird flies itself these days. All you have to do is point and shoot. Sarah looked up from the screen. The manual suggests that in distributed jamming scenarios, manual targeting with backup systems provides better target acquisition than automated sequences. Morrison shook his head with a grin. You really need to let go of those books, Chun. This isn't World War II. We don't navigate by the stars anymore. He tapped the side of his helmet. Everything we need is right here in the HUD. Real time. Data, instant analysis, automatic targeting. Why would you want to do things the hard way? Because sometimes the hard way is the only way that works, Sarah replied quietly. Morrison laughed as he walked away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Good luck with that philosophy, Chen. Hope it doesn't get you shot down. Sarah remained in the empty briefing room for another 10 minutes, studying the tactical display and cross-referencing it with the scenarios she had memorized from her technical manuals. The other pilots were already heading to the flight line, confident in their advanced avionics and automated systems. But Sarah knew something they didn't. She had read every after-action report from the last 5 years of F-22 operations, and she had noticed a pattern that the squadron's combat effectiveness reports had glossed over. The walk to the flight line took her past the squadron operations center, where ground crew members were performing final checks on the F-22 Raptors. The aircraft sat in perfect formation, their angular stealth profiles gleaming in the Nevada sun. Each jet represented nearly $200 million of the most advanced aerospace technology ever developed, packed with sensors, computers, and weapon systems that could engage multiple targets simultaneously while remaining virtually invisible to enemy radar. Sarah's aircraft, tail number 054086, sat at the end of the line. It was identical to the others in every technical specification, but Sarah had spent more time studying its systems than any other pilot in the squadron. While her colleagues trusted the automated functions, Sarah had memorized the manual override procedures for every major system. She knew the exact radar cross-section of the aircraft at different angles, the optimal flight profiles for maintaining stealth, and the specific electronic signatures that enemy jamming systems were designed to target. Chief Master Sergeant David Kim approached as Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection. Kim had been maintaining F-22 since the aircraft entered service, and he had worked with hundreds of pilots over the years. "Morning, Captain Chen. Aircraft's ready to go. All systems green." Sarah nodded, running her hand along the leading edge of the wing. "Sergeant Kim, have you noticed any issues with the APG-77 radar when operating in high electronic noise environments?" Kim paused, his expression thoughtful. "Funny you should ask, ma'am. We've had a few reports from pilots about targeting difficulties when the enemy uses sophisticated jamming. Nothing that shows up in the maintenance logs, but the pilots mention it in their debrief notes." "What kind of difficulties?" "Target lock delays mostly. The computer takes longer to sort through the electronic noise and identify genuine targets. Most pilots just wait for the system to figure it out, but it can add precious seconds to the engagement time." Sarah absorbed this information, filing it away with the dozens of other technical details she had collected over the past year. "Are there manual backup procedures for target acquisition?" Kim smiled. "There are, but most pilots don't bother learning them. The automated systems work fine 99% of the time. Why would you want to make things harder for yourself?" It was the same question Morrison had asked, and Sarah gave the same answer. Because sometimes the hard way is the only way that works. As Sarah climbed into the cockpit of her F-22, she noticed that the other pilots were already strapping in, their pre-flight checks perfunctory and routine. They trusted their aircraft implicitly, confident that the advanced systems would handle any situation they might encounter. Sarah's approach was different. She spent an extra 5 minutes verifying the manual override switches, checking the backup targeting systems, and reviewing the emergency procedures that most pilots never used. The cockpit of an F-22 Raptor was a marvel of human engineering, designed to present critical information to the pilot through a sophisticated heads-up display and multiple digital screens. Every system was integrated, every function optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum pilot workload. The aircraft was designed to fight and win against multiple enemies simultaneously, using sensors and weapons that could engage targets beyond visual range while remaining undetected. Sarah's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, but unlike her squadron mates, she didn't rely solely on the automated startup sequences. She verified each system manually, cross-checking the digital displays against the backup analog instruments that most pilots ignored. Her technical manuals had taught her that redundancy was the key to survival in aerial combat, and she had trained herself to use every backup system available. The radio crackled to life as the squadron prepared for takeoff. "Viper flight, this is Nellis Tower. You are cleared for takeoff, runway 21 left. Weather is clear, winds light and variable. Good hunting." Morrison's voice came through. "The squadron frequency. Viper flight, check in." "Viper 2, ready," Harper replied. "Viper 3, ready," Williams added. The check-in continued down the line until it reached Sarah. "Viper 7, ready." Morrison's voice carried a note of amusement. "Viper 7, did you bring your manual with you?" Sarah's response was calm and professional. "Negative, Viper lead. All required information has been committed to memory." "Outstanding, Chun. Try to keep up with the rest of us." The 12 F-22 Raptors taxied to the runway in perfect formation, their engines producing the distinctive whine of advanced turbofan technology. Sarah's aircraft was 7th in the lineup, positioned toward the rear of the formation. As they waited for final clearance, she used the time to review the tactical scenario one more time in her mind. 6 hostile aircraft in a hexagonal formation, each equipped with advanced electronic warfare systems. The enemy would attempt to jam the F-22's radar and targeting computers, forcing the American pilots to rely on visual identification and manual targeting procedures. According to the technical manuals Sarah had studied, this type of coordinated jamming was specifically designed to overwhelm automated systems, creating gaps in sensor coverage that enemy aircraft could exploit. But Sarah had found something in the manuals that her squadron mates had missed. Hidden in the technical specifications was a detailed procedure for manual target acquisition that bypassed the automated systems entirely. It required precise timing, extensive knowledge of radar cross-sections, and the ability to calculate targeting solutions without computer assistance. Most importantly, it required a pilot who had memorized the exact procedures rather than relying on the digital displays to provide instructions. The tower gave final clearance, and the F-22 formation took off into the clear Nevada sky. Sarah's aircraft lifted off smoothly, its advanced fly-by-wire systems automatically adjusting for wind conditions and weight distribution. As they climbed to altitude, she couldn't help but notice that her squadron mates seemed relaxed, almost casual in their approach to what was supposed to be a complex combat scenario. Morrison's voice came through the radio as they reached cruising altitude. Viper flight, we're approaching the engagement area. Enemy aircraft should be visible on radar in approximately 5 minutes. Remember, this is a live-fire exercise with simulated weapons. Trust your systems, follow your training, and let the computer do the work. Sarah checked her radar display, noting the clear scope that indicated no enemy aircraft in the area. Yet, according to the briefing, the hostile aircraft would approach from multiple directions simultaneously, using their electronic warfare systems to mask their approach until they were within engagement range. It was a scenario designed to test the F-22's ability to handle multiple threats while maintaining stealth. As the minutes passed, Sarah found herself thinking about the countless hours she had spent studying the technical manuals that her colleagues dismissed as outdated. Those manuals contained decades of accumulated knowledge from test pilots, combat veterans, and aerospace engineers. They documented not just how the F-22 systems were supposed to work, but also how they actually performed under stress, and what to do when they didn't work as advertised. The first indication of enemy contact came as a subtle change in the electromagnetic spectrum detected by the F-22's passive sensors. Sarah's training kicked in immediately, and she began the mental calculations that would allow her to track the enemy aircraft even if her radar was jammed. It was a technique she had learned from a manual that was supposedly obsolete, but she had practiced it until it became second nature. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio, and Sarah could hear the tension beginning to build. Viper flight, I'm seeing electronic interference on my scope. Looks like the enemy is starting their jamming sequence. Harper's voice followed. Immediately, Viper 2, confirming electronic noise. My targeting computer is having trouble sorting through the clutter. Williams chimed in next. Viper 3, same here. The automated systems are struggling to maintain lock-on. Sarah listened to the growing concern in her squadron mates' voices as their advanced avionics began to falter under the coordinated electronic attack. Their confidence in the F-22's automated systems was being shaken as the enemy jamming proved more effective than anticipated. One by one, the pilots reported difficulty maintaining target locks, delayed response times from their computers, and confusion in their tactical displays. But Sarah's approach was different. While her colleagues wrestled with malfunctioning automated systems, she had already switched to manual targeting procedures. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, activating backup systems and engaging manual override functions that most pilots had never used. The technical manual she had memorized provided her with detailed procedures for exactly this type of scenario. As the electronic warfare intensified, Sarah found herself in a unique position. While her squadron mates struggled with compromised automated systems, she was operating with manual procedures that were immune to electronic jamming. Her radar might be cluttered with false signals, but her knowledge of enemy aircraft performance characteristics allowed her to distinguish between genuine threats and electronic decoys. The hostile aircraft appeared on the edge of the engagement area, their stealth profiles making them difficult to detect even with the F-22's advanced sensors. Sarah counted 6 contacts, arranged in the hexagonal formation she had studied in. Her manuals. Each enemy aircraft was positioned to maximize the effectiveness of their electronic warfare systems, creating overlapping fields of jamming that confused and overwhelmed the automated targeting systems. Morrison's voice came through the radio with growing frustration. "Viper flight. I'm having trouble getting a clean lock on any of these targets. The computer keeps cycling through potential contacts without confirming any of them." Harper's response was equally strained. "Viper 2, same problem. The automated targeting sequence is stuck in a loop. It can't decide which contacts are real." Sarah keyed her radio. "Viper lead. Recommend switching to manual targeting procedures. The enemy jamming is specifically designed to overwhelm automated systems." Morrison's reply was sharp. "Negative, Viper 7. Maintain standard protocols. The computer will sort this out." But Sarah could hear the doubt in his voice. The confidence that had characterized the squadron's approach to the mission was beginning to crack under the reality of sophisticated electronic warfare. The F-22's automated systems, for all their advanced technology, were proving vulnerable to the coordinated jamming attack that Sarah had predicted based on her study of the technical manuals. As the engagement continued, Sarah found herself in an increasingly isolated position. While her squadron mates struggled with malfunctioning systems, she was successfully tracking multiple enemy aircraft using manual procedures that bypassed the electronic jamming entirely. Her knowledge of radar cross-sections, electromagnetic signatures, and targeting geometry allowed her to maintain situational awareness even as the automated systems failed around her. The irony was not lost on her. The technical manuals that her colleagues had mocked as outdated were proving to be her greatest asset in a scenario that the F-22's designers had supposedly anticipated. The aircraft's systems were advanced, but they were not infallible. And when they failed, only a pilot who understood the manual procedures could continue to fight effectively. Sarah's hands moved across the controls with increasing confidence as she engaged manual targeting procedures that most pilots had never bothered to learn. The enemy aircraft were still out there, still dangerous, still capable of inflicting serious damage on the American formation. But for the first time since the engagement began, Sarah felt like she had a clear picture of the tactical situation. The technical manuals she had memorized were about to be put to the ultimate test. And as her squadron mates continued to struggle with compromised automated systems, Sarah prepared to demonstrate that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. The enemy had planned for sophisticated electronic warfare, but they had not planned for a pilot who could fight without relying on the very systems they were trying to jam. The battle was far from over, but Sarah Chen was ready for what came next. Her technical manuals had taught her that preparation and knowledge were the keys to survival in aerial combat, and she had both in abundance. The simulation debriefing room felt smaller than usual as the 12 pilots of Viper Squadron filed in after their morning training exercise. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across faces that showed varying degrees of frustration and confusion. What was supposed to have been a routine engagement against 6 simulated enemy aircraft had turned into a masterclass in electronic warfare tactics that left most of the squadron's automated systems struggling to maintain basic functionality. Sarah Chen took her usual seat in the back row, her flight suit still damp with perspiration from the intense aerial engagement. Around her, the other pilots muttered complaints about system failures, targeting delays, and radar interference. That had made the exercise far more challenging than anticipated. The confidence that had filled the room during the morning briefing had evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that their advanced F-22 Raptors were not as invulnerable as they had believed. Colonel Rodriguez entered the room carrying a tablet loaded with telemetry data from the exercise. His expression was unreadable, but Sarah noticed the slight tension in his jaw that indicated the results had not met expectations. Behind him walked Dr. Elena Vasquez, a civilian contractor who specialized in electronic warfare analysis. Her presence at the day briefing suggested that the morning's exercise had revealed some significant vulnerabilities in the squadron's tactical approach. "Gentlemen and ladies," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the measured tone of a career officer delivering unpleasant news. "This morning's exercise highlighted some serious gaps in our operational readiness. The enemy's electronic countermeasures proved far more effective than our intelligence assessments had predicted." He activated the wall display, showing a tactical overview of the morning's engagement. Red icons representing the 6 enemy aircraft formed a perfect hexagonal pattern, while blue icons showed the positions of the F-22 formation. Green lines indicated successful target locks, while red lines showed failed or delayed targeting attempts. The display was overwhelmingly red. Morrison raised his hand from the front row. "Sir, our targeting computers couldn't maintain stable locks on any of the enemy aircraft. The automated systems kept cycling through potential targets without confirming any of them. It was like the computer couldn't decide what was real and what was electronic noise." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her analytical gaze sweeping across the assembled pilots. "Captain Morrison, what you experienced is called adaptive distributed jamming. The enemy aircraft use coordinated electronic warfare systems that specifically target the algorithms used by automated targeting computers. They create false radar returns, inject noise into sensor feeds, and manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum to confuse digital processing systems." Harper leaned forward in her seat. "Doctor, our briefings always emphasized that the F-22 systems were designed to handle electronic warfare environments. Are you saying that our avionics are obsolete?" "Not obsolete," Vasquez replied carefully, "but potentially vulnerable to sophisticated coordinated attacks. The F-22's electronic systems were designed to handle traditional jamming techniques. However, enemy electronic warfare capabilities have evolved significantly in recent years. They're now using artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to adapt their jamming techniques in real time, specifically targeting the weaknesses in automated systems." Williams spoke up from the middle of the room. "So what's the solution? Do we need software updates? Better algorithms?" Rodriguez answered before Vasquez could respond. "The solution, Captain Williams, is training. We need to develop alternative tactics that don't rely solely on automated systems. We need pilots who can fight effectively, even when their computers are compromised." Sarah felt a familiar stirring of vindication, but she kept her expression neutral. The conversation was moving in a direction that validated everything she had studied in her technical manuals, but she had learned not to volunteer information unless specifically asked. The colonel continued his analysis of the morning's exercise. "Looking at the telemetry data, most of you struggled to adapt when your automated systems were compromised. You waited for the computers to solve the problem instead of taking manual control of the situation. In a real combat scenario, that delay could be fatal." Morrison's voice carried a defensive edge. "Sir, we've been trained to trust our systems. The F-22 was designed to handle multiple threats simultaneously using automated targeting sequences. We've never been taught manual backup procedures." "That's going to change," Rodriguez replied firmly. "Dr. Vasquez has identified several manual targeting techniques that can bypass electronic jamming entirely. We're going to implement immediate training on these procedures." Vasquez activated her own presentation, displaying complex diagrams of radar cross-sections, electromagnetic signatures, and targeting geometries. Sarah recognized many of the concepts from her technical manuals, but she noticed that several pilots were already looking overwhelmed by the technical complexity. The key to manual targeting, Vasquez explained, is understanding the physics of radar detection and the specific electromagnetic signatures of different aircraft types. Instead of relying on computers to process this information, pilots need to learn to interpret raw sensor data and calculate targeting solutions manually. Captain Stevens, one of the squadron's newer pilots, raised his hand. "Doctor, how long does it take to learn these manual procedures? This looks incredibly complicated." "For most pilots, several months of intensive training," Vasquez replied honestly. "The procedures require memorizing detailed performance characteristics of both friendly and enemy aircraft, understanding electromagnetic spectrum management, and developing the ability to perform complex calculations under combat stress." A chorus of groans rippled through the room. Several pilots exchanged glances that clearly communicated their reluctance to undertake such extensive additional training. The F-22 community had attracted pilots specifically because of its advanced automated systems that reduced pilot workload and simplified complex tactical scenarios. Rodriguez raised his hand for silence. "I understand that this represents a significant training burden. However, recent intelligence assessments indicate that our potential adversaries are specifically developing electronic warfare capabilities designed to neutralize our technological advantages. We need pilots who can fight and win even when their computers are compromised." Sarah listened to the discussion with growing interest. Everything that was being presented as new training requirements was material she had already mastered through her independent study of technical manuals. While her squadron mates faced months of intensive training to learn manual targeting procedures, she was already proficient in techniques that most pilots had never heard of. Dr. Vasquez continued her presentation, detailing the specific vulnerabilities that electronic warfare systems exploited in automated targeting computers. She explained how coordinated jamming could create false radar returns that overwhelmed digital processing algorithms, how electromagnetic interference could disrupt sensor fusion systems, and how adaptive jamming could learn and counter specific automated responses. "The enemy's strategy," Vasquez explained, "is to force our pilots to fight at a technological disadvantage. They understand that American pilots have become dependent on automated systems, so they've developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize those systems." Morrison's frustration was evident in his voice. "So they're trying to drag us down to their level, force us to fight with inferior technology." "Not inferior," Vasquez corrected. "Different. Manual targeting techniques are actually more reliable in heavily jammed environments because they don't depend on digital processing systems that can be compromised. They require more skill and training, but they're also more flexible and adaptable." Harper asked the question that several pilots were obviously thinking. "Doctor, are there any pilots in the Air Force who are already proficient in these manual techniques?" Vasquez consulted her tablet. "According to our assessment, very few active pilots have extensive experience with manual targeting procedures. Most current training programs focus on automated systems management rather than manual backup techniques." Sarah felt the weight of attention as several pilots turned to look at her. Her reputation for studying technical manuals was well known throughout the squadron, and more than one pilot had noticed her calm performance during the morning's exercise when everyone else's systems were failing. Rodriguez followed their gaze. "Captain Chen, do you have experience with manual targeting procedures?" Sarah straightened in her chair. "Yes, sir. I've studied the technical manuals extensively and practiced the procedures during personal training time." "How extensively?" Rodriguez asked. "I've memorized the electromagnetic signatures and radar cross-sections for all current enemy aircraft types, sir. I'm proficient in manual calculation of targeting solutions, range estimation using visual cues, and sensor interpretation without automated assistance." The room fell silent. Several pilots stared at Sarah with expressions ranging From surprise to skepticism, Morrison turned in his seat to face her directly. Chen, are you saying you can do all of this manual targeting stuff that Dr. Vasquez is talking about? I can perform the basic procedures, sir. I've been practicing them for about 2 years. Williams shook his head in disbelief. 2 years? You've been studying this stuff for 2 years? Why? Sarah chose her words carefully. I read an after-action report from a training exercise where electronic jamming caused significant targeting delays. I wanted to understand the backup procedures in case automated systems were compromised. Harper's voice carried a note of admiration. So while we were all trusting our computers, you were learning to fly without them. I was learning to fly with redundant capabilities, ma'am. The manuals emphasize that backup procedures should be practiced regularly to maintain proficiency. Dr. Vasquez looked intrigued. Captain Chen, which technical manuals did you study? Sarah listed the publications she had memorized: Advanced Electronic Warfare Countermeasures, Manual Targeting Procedures, Electromagnetic Spectrum Management, Radar Cross-Section Analysis, and Visual Identification Techniques. Several of the manuals were classified documents that required special clearance to access. Rodriguez made a note on his tablet. Captain Chen, I want you to work with Dr. Vasquez to develop a training program for the rest of the squadron. You'll serve as our subject matter expert on manual targeting procedures. Morrison's voice carried a hint of resentment. Sir, with respect, are we really going to base our training program on what one pilot learned from reading old manuals? Captain Morrison, Rodriguez replied with steel in his voice. This morning Captain Chen was the only pilot in the squadron who maintained effective target tracking when automated systems were compromised. While you and the rest of the squadron struggled with system failures, she continued to operate at full capability. I'd say that makes her exactly the right person to lead this training. The colonel's words hung in the air like a challenge. Several pilots shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uncomfortable with the implication that their technological superiority was not as complete as they had believed. Dr. Vasquez turned to address Sarah directly. Captain Chen, would you be willing to demonstrate some of these manual targeting techniques for the squadron? I think it would be helpful for everyone to see how these procedures work in practice. Sarah nodded. Yes, ma'am. One can demonstrate basic target identification, range estimation, and manual lock-on procedures. The next hour was spent with Sarah at the front of the room, walking the squadron through techniques that she had learned from manuals that most of them had never opened. She explained how to calculate target range using visual cues, how to estimate aircraft speed and heading using geometric relationships, and how to maintain target tracking when automated systems were compromised. What surprised her most was not the complexity of the material, but how foreign it seemed to pilots who had trained exclusively on automated systems. Concepts that she considered basic, like using backup analog instruments to verify digital displays, were completely new to most of the squadron. Morrison asked pointed questions throughout the demonstration, clearly skeptical that manual procedures could be as effective as automated systems. Chen, how can you possibly calculate targeting solutions as quickly as a computer? The F-22's processors can handle millions of calculations per second. Sarah's response was measured and professional. Sir, computers are faster at processing large amounts of data, but they're also vulnerable to electronic interference. Manual calculations are slower but more reliable in contested environments. The goal isn't to replace automated systems, but to provide backup capabilities when those systems are compromised. Harper raised a more practical concern. Sarah, this looks incredibly difficult to master. How long did it take you to become proficient? I've been studying these procedures for 2 years, ma'am, but I practice them regularly during personal training time. The key is repetition until the procedures become automatic. Williams looked skeptical. 2 years of study just to learn backup procedures? That seems like a lot of effort for something we'll hopefully never need. Sarah's response reflected the philosophy that had driven her independent study. Sir, the manual states that emergency procedures should be practiced until they become second nature. In a combat situation, you don't want to be learning backup procedures for the first time. Dr. Vasquez watched the demonstration with obvious interest, taking detailed notes on Sarah's techniques and the squadron's reactions. As the session concluded, she approached Sarah with a proposal that would change everything. Captain Chen, I'd like to recommend you for advanced electronic warfare training. The Air Force is developing a new program for pilots who specialize in manual targeting techniques. Based on what I've seen today, you'd be an ideal candidate. Sarah felt a surge of excitement, but she kept her expression professional. I'd be honored to participate, ma'am. Rodriguez overheard the conversation and joined them. Dr. Vasquez, what kind of advanced training are we talking about? It's a classified program, Colonel, but I can tell you that it involves the most sophisticated electronic warfare scenarios the Air Force can create. Pilots learn to operate effectively in environments where all automated systems are compromised. It's extremely challenging, but pilots who complete the program become capable of fighting and winning in situations that would be impossible for conventionally trained pilots. The colonel considered this information. How long is the program? 6 months of intensive training. But Captain Chen already has most of the foundational knowledge. She might be able to complete it in half that time. Sarah listened to this conversation with growing anticipation. The prospect of advanced training in electronic warfare techniques was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been preparing for. Through her independent study, all those hours spent memorizing technical manuals and practicing manual procedures had positioned her for exactly this moment. As the debriefing session concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by squadron mates who were suddenly very interested in her manual targeting techniques. The same pilots who had mocked her for reading technical manuals were now asking detailed questions about procedures they had dismissed as obsolete. Stevens approached her as they filed out of the briefing room. Sarah, I have to ask, how did you know to study all this manual targeting stuff? What made you think it would be important? Sarah's answer was simple and honest. I read an intelligence report about enemy electronic warfare capabilities. It was clear that they were developing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize our automated systems. I wanted to be prepared for that possibility. Morrison overheard the conversation and stopped walking. You read intelligence reports in your spare time? I read everything I can get my hands on, sir. Technical manuals, after-action reports, intelligence assessments, historical case studies. The more you understand about aerial combat, the better prepared you are for unexpected situations. Harper shook her head with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Sarah, most of us spend our free time relaxing. You spend yours studying warfare theory. I enjoy it, ma'am. Understanding how aircraft and weapon systems work is fascinating to me. And the knowledge has practical applications. Williams asked the question that several pilots were obviously thinking. Do you really think manual targeting techniques will be necessary in actual combat? This morning's exercise was pretty extreme. Sarah's response reflected her deep understanding of current threat assessments. Sir, intelligence reports indicate that our potential adversaries are investing heavily in electronic warfare capabilities. They understand that American pilots depend on automated systems, so they're developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit that dependency. Manual procedures provide a capability that's immune to electronic interference. The conversation continued as they walked toward the flight line, where their F-22 Raptors waited for the afternoon training session. Sarah noticed that the dynamic within the squadron was already beginning to shift. Pilots who had previously dismissed her as overly studious were now seeking her advice on technical matters. But Sarah also sensed an undercurrent of resentment from some squadron members who were uncomfortable with the implication that their training was incomplete. Morrison, in particular, seemed defensive about the suggestion that automated systems were not sufficient for all combat scenarios. As they reached the flight line, Dr. Vasquez pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "Captain Chen, I want to be frank with you. The advanced training program I mentioned is not just about learning manual targeting techniques. It's about preparing for a new kind of warfare where electronic superiority determines the outcome of engagements." Sarah listened intently as Vasquez continued. "Intelligence assessments indicate that our adversaries are developing the capability to completely shut down our automated systems. They're using artificial intelligence to learn how our systems work, then developing countermeasures that can adapt in real time to our tactics." The implications of this information sent a chill through Sarah. If enemy electronic warfare capabilities were advancing that rapidly, then the Air Force's entire tactical doctrine might need to be reconsidered. "Doctor, are you saying that our technological advantages might not be permanent?" "I'm saying that technology is a double-edged sword. The more dependent we become on automated systems, the more vulnerable we become to countermeasures that can compromise those systems. Manual procedures provide a backup capability that's immune to electronic interference." Sarah understood the strategic implications immediately. The F-22 program had been designed around the assumption of American technological superiority. If that superiority was being neutralized by sophisticated electronic warfare, then pilots needed alternative capabilities to maintain effectiveness. "What kind of scenarios would the advanced training program cover?" Sarah asked. "Everything. From basic electronic jamming to complete system shutdowns. You'd learn to fight effectively when your radar is blinded, your targeting computer is compromised, and your communications are jammed. It's the most challenging training the Air Force offers." The prospect was both exciting and daunting. Sarah had spent 2 years preparing for exactly this kind of challenge, but she understood that advanced training would push her skills far beyond anything she had attempted before. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah found herself at the center of intense discussions about manual targeting procedures and electronic warfare countermeasures. Squadron mates who had never shown interest in technical details were suddenly asking detailed questions about radar cross-sections, electromagnetic signatures, and targeting calculations. The transformation was remarkable. A few hours earlier, she had been the squadron's resident technical expert, tolerated but not particularly respected. Now she was being consulted as the authority on capabilities that might determine the squadron's survival in actual combat. But Sarah also understood that knowledge alone was not sufficient. The manual targeting techniques she had mastered required constant practice to maintain proficiency. More importantly, they required the kind of situational awareness and tactical thinking that could only be developed through realistic training scenarios. That evening, Sarah returned to her quarters with her mind racing through the possibilities that Dr. Vasquez's training program represented. She pulled out her collection of technical manuals and began reviewing the most advanced procedures she had studied. Tomorrow's training session would be different. Instead of being the pilot who read manuals while others trusted their computers, she would be the instructor teaching techniques that might save their lives. The irony was not lost on her. The same technical knowledge that had made her an outsider was now making her indispensable. The manuals she had studied in isolation were becoming the foundation for the squadron's tactical evolution. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the day's events. The morning's exercise had revealed vulnerabilities that most pilots hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The afternoon's debriefing had forced them to confront the reality that their technological advantages were not absolute. And her own demonstration had proven that alternative approaches were not only possible but necessary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the squadron began to grapple with the implications of electronic warfare, tactics that could neutralize their most advanced systems. Sarah was ready for those challenges, but she wondered if her squadron mates truly understood what they were facing. The technical manual stacked beside her bed represented years of accumulated knowledge about aerial combat in contested environments. That knowledge was about to be tested in ways that would determine not just her own survival, but the survival of pilots who had finally learned to value preparation over assumption. The next morning would mark the beginning of a transformation that would reshape how the squadron approached aerial combat. Sarah Chen, the pilot who had been mocked for reading manuals, was about to become the teacher who would prepare her colleagues for a new kind of warfare, where knowledge mattered more than technology. The emergency klaxon echoed through the corridors of Nellis Air Force Base at 0347 hours, its harsh electronic wail cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade. Sarah Chen bolted upright in her bunk, instantly alert despite having been in deep sleep moments before. The sound was unmistakable, real-world scramble, not an exercise. She had heard it only twice before in her career, and both times it had meant that American forces were under immediate threat. Within seconds, the base-wide announcement system crackled to life. All Viper Squadron pilots report to the briefing room immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. All Viper Squadron pilots report to the briefing room immediately. Sarah rolled out of her bunk and began pulling on her flight suit with practiced efficiency. Around her, the pilot quarters erupted into controlled chaos as 12 aviators simultaneously prepared for what could be actual combat, the usual. Morning banter was replaced by focused silence, broken only by the sounds of zippers, Velcro, and boots hitting the floor. The hallway outside the quarters buzzed with activity as pilots, ground crew, and support personnel moved with urgent purpose. Red emergency lighting had replaced the normal fluorescent illumination, casting everything in an ominous crimson glow. Sarah could hear the distant roar of jet engines spinning up on the flight line, indicating that aircraft were already being prepared for immediate launch. The briefing room was packed when Sarah arrived, with pilots still filing in behind her. Colonel Rodriguez stood at the front of the room, beside a large display screen showing a map of the Eastern Pacific Ocean. Red symbols marked the positions of unidentified aircraft that had appeared on long-range radar approximately 30 minutes earlier. The tactical picture was clear and alarming. 6 unknown aircraft approaching U.S. territorial waters in a formation that suggested hostile intent. Dr. Vasquez was also present, her civilian clothes hastily thrown on over pajamas. Her presence at an emergency briefing indicated that the electronic warfare implications of the situation were significant. She held a tablet displaying real-time intelligence updates and electromagnetic spectrum analysis. Rodriguez wasted no time on preliminaries. Ladies and gentlemen, at 0315 hours, NORAD detected 6 unidentified aircraft approaching from the Northwest Pacific. The aircraft appeared suddenly on our radar screens with no prior tracking data, suggesting advanced stealth capabilities. Their current heading and speed indicate they will reach U.S. territorial waters within 2 hours. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Unidentified stealth aircraft approaching American territory represented a level of threat that the squadron had trained for but never experienced. The tactical situation demanded immediate response, but the electronic signature characteristics suggested an adversary with capabilities that matched or exceeded American technology. Morrison raised his hand. "Sir, what's our current threat assessment? Are we dealing with a known adversary?" Rodriguez consulted his briefing notes. "Intelligence is still analyzing the radar signatures, but preliminary assessment suggests these are not aircraft from any known inventory. The stealth characteristics are too advanced for most potential adversaries, and the formation pattern doesn't match any standard tactical doctrine." Harper leaned forward in her seat. "Colonel, are we looking at a test of our air defense capabilities? Could this be a probing mission designed to gather intelligence on our response procedures?" "That's a possibility," Rodriguez replied. But we have to treat this as a genuine threat until proven otherwise. The rules of engagement are clear. Any unidentified aircraft approaching U.S. territorial waters will be intercepted and, if necessary, engaged. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward to address the electronic warfare implications. Based on the radar signatures, these aircraft are using sophisticated stealth technology combined with what appears to be adaptive electronic countermeasures. They're not just trying to avoid detection. They're actively jamming our surveillance systems. Williams asked the question that several pilots were obviously thinking. Doctor, how sophisticated are we talking about? Are these countermeasures more advanced than what we trained against yesterday? Vasquez's expression was grim. Significantly more advanced. The jamming signatures suggest they're using artificial intelligence to adapt their electronic warfare techniques in real time. They're learning how our systems respond and adjusting their countermeasures accordingly. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. This was exactly the scenario that her technical manuals had warned about. An adversary with electronic warfare capabilities, specifically designed to neutralize American technological advantages. The training exercises had been preparation for this moment, but the real-world implications were far more serious than any simulation. Rodriguez outlined the mission parameters. Viper Squadron will launch in full strength to intercept these aircraft. Primary objective is identification and warning. Secondary objective is escort to the edge of international waters. Rules of engagement: authorized offensive action if hostile intent is demonstrated. Stevens raised his hand from the back of the room. Sir, what are our expectations regarding electronic interference? Should we prepare for the same kind of jamming we experienced in yesterday's exercise? Expect worse, Rodriguez replied bluntly. Dr. Vasquez's preliminary analysis suggests these aircraft have electronic warfare capabilities that exceed anything we've encountered in training. Your automated systems may be significantly degraded or completely compromised. The weight of this information settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Yesterday's training exercise had been challenging enough when their automated systems struggled against simulated jamming. The prospect of facing real-world electronic warfare with capabilities that exceeded their training scenarios was sobering. Morrison's voice carried a note of concern. Sir, if our automated systems are compromised, how do we maintain effective intercept capabilities? The F-22's entire tactical doctrine is built around automated targeting and sensor fusion. Rodriguez turned to look directly at Sarah. Captain Chen, you've been training the squadron on manual targeting procedures. In your assessment, are these techniques sufficient to maintain operational effectiveness against advanced electronic countermeasures? All eyes turned to Sarah as she considered her response. The question went to the heart of everything she had studied and practiced for the past 2 years. The manual targeting techniques she had mastered were designed specifically for situations where automated systems were compromised, but she had never tested them against the kind of advanced electronic warfare that Dr. Vasquez was describing. Sir, manual targeting procedures can maintain basic intercept capabilities, even when automated systems are completely jammed. However, the effectiveness depends on the pilot's proficiency with manual calculations and visual identification techniques. Most of the squadron has only had limited exposure to these procedures. Rodriguez nodded grimly. That's our reality, Captain. We're going into this mission with a mix of experienced pilots using compromised automated systems and manual procedures that most of us are still learning. Dr. Vasquez interjected with additional technical details. The electronic signatures suggest that these aircraft are specifically configured to exploit the vulnerabilities in American avionics systems. They're not using broad-spectrum jamming. That affects everything equally. Instead, they're using targeted interference designed to disrupt specific components of the F-22 sensor and targeting systems. Harper asked for clarification. Doctor, are you saying they know exactly how our systems work and have developed countermeasures specifically for the F-22? That's exactly what I'm saying. The jamming techniques they're using suggest detailed knowledge of F-22 system architecture and operational procedures. This isn't a generic electronic warfare capability. It's a weapon system designed specifically to neutralize American air superiority. The implications of this revelation sent a wave of unease through the assembled pilots. The F-22 Raptor had been designed as the ultimate air superiority fighter, virtually invisible to enemy radar and capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously. The idea that an adversary had developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize these capabilities challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying American air power doctrine. Rodriguez continued the briefing with launch procedures and formation assignments. We'll launch in 3 flights of 4 aircraft each. Flight leads will be Morrison, Harper, and Chen. Each flight will approach from a different vector to prevent the enemy from concentrating their electronic warfare against a single formation. Sarah felt a surge of surprise at being assigned as a flight lead. It was the first time she had been given command responsibility in a real-world operational mission. The assignment reflected Rodriguez's confidence in her manual targeting capabilities, but it also placed her in a position where her theoretical knowledge would be tested under actual combat conditions. Morrison's voice carried a note of skepticism. "Sir, with respect, Captain Chen has never led a flight in a tactical situation. Are we sure this is the right time for her first command experience?" Rodriguez's response was firm and decisive. "Captain Morrison, Captain Chen is the most qualified pilot in this squadron to operate effectively when automated systems are compromised. Given the electronic warfare threat we're facing, her expertise may be the difference between mission success and failure." The colonel's words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah understood that she was being placed in a position where her years of independent study would be put to the ultimate test. Everything she had learned from technical manuals and practiced in isolation would now be evaluated under the stress of actual combat against an adversary with advanced electronic warfare capabilities. Dr. Vasquez approached Sarah as the formal briefing concluded. "Captain Chen, I need to brief you on some additional technical details that aren't in the general mission briefing. The electronic signatures we're detecting suggest capabilities that go beyond anything in your training manuals." Sarah followed Vasquez to a secure briefing room where classified intelligence materials were displayed on a separate screen. The technical data was sobering. The unknown aircraft were using electronic warfare techniques that represented a quantum leap beyond known capabilities. They weren't just jamming American systems. They were learning how those systems responded and adapting their countermeasures in real time. "Captain, what you're looking at is the electromagnetic signature of artificial intelligence applied to electronic warfare. These aircraft aren't just following pre-programmed jamming sequences. They're analyzing our system's responses and developing new countermeasures on the fly." Sarah studied the technical data with growing concern. The jamming techniques displayed on the screen were unlike anything she had encountered in her manual training. They represented a fundamentally different approach to electronic warfare, one that could adapt and evolve during the course of an engagement. "Doctor, are our manual targeting procedures effective against adaptive jamming?" Vasquez's response was honest but not encouraging. "We don't know. Manual procedures are immune to direct electronic interference, but if the enemy can learn how you're compensating for their jamming, they might be able to develop countermeasures for manual techniques as well." The implication was clear. Sarah would be leading her flight into a situation where even her specialized training might not be sufficient. The enemy had capabilities that exceeded anything American forces had faced before, and the outcome of the engagement was far from certain. As Sarah returned to the main briefing room, she found the squadron making final preparations for launch. Pilots were checking equipment, reviewing tactical procedures, and asking last-minute questions about rules of engagement. The atmosphere was tense but professional, reflecting the seriousness of the situation and the uncertainty of facing an unknown adversary. Morrison approached her as she collected her flight gear. "Chen, I want you to know that I respect your technical knowledge, but leading a flight in combat is different from studying manuals. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Sarah's response reflected the confidence she had gained from years of preparation. "Sir, I've studied every aspect of aerial combat that I could get my hands on. I understand the responsibility, and I'm prepared to execute the mission." Morrison nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. "Just remember that your flight is depending on you. When the shooting starts, theoretical knowledge has to become practical action." The walk to the flight line took the squadron past ground crews who were working with obvious urgency to prepare the F-22 Raptors for immediate launch. Weapons specialists loaded air-to-air missiles while avionics technicians performed final system checks. The aircraft themselves seemed different in the pre-dawn darkness, their angular stealth profiles more menacing than usual under the red. Emergency lighting. Sarah's F-22, tail number 054086, waited at the head of her assigned flight line. The aircraft had been loaded with a full complement of a IM-12 OMAM missiles and a IM-9 Sidewinders, indicating that the mission planners were taking the threat seriously. Chief Master Sergeant Kim approached as Sarah began her pre-flight inspection. "Captain Chen, aircraft is ready for immediate launch. All systems check green, but I want you to know that we've loaded some special equipment based on Dr. Vasquez's recommendations." Sarah looked questioningly at the chief, who pointed to a small modification that had been made to the cockpit instrumentation. "It's a backup electromagnetic spectrum analyzer, ma'am. If the main systems get jammed, this will give you raw data that you can interpret manually." The addition of specialized equipment reflected the seriousness of the electronic warfare threat they were facing. Sarah understood that the mission planners were preparing for scenarios where standard F-22 systems might be completely compromised. As she climbed into the cockpit, Sarah noticed that her 3 wingmen were already strapped in and running through their pre-flight checklists. Lieutenant Colonel James Blade Martinez was her number 2, a veteran pilot with extensive combat experience. Captain Amanda Falcon Roberts flew as number 3, known for her aggressive flying style and quick decision-making. Captain David Ghost Park occupied the number 4 position, a technical specialist who understood avionics systems almost as well as Sarah herself. The pre-flight checks proceeded smoothly, but Sarah noticed that all 4 pilots were paying extra attention to backup systems and manual procedures. The squadron's recent training on manual targeting techniques had clearly influenced their approach to mission preparation. As the F-22 formation taxied toward the runway, Sarah could see the other 2 flights preparing for launch. Morrison led the first flight with his usual confident demeanor, but even he seemed more subdued than usual. Harper's flight was already moving into position for takeoff, their aircraft loaded and ready for immediate combat. The tower cleared Viper Squadron for immediate takeoff, and 12 F-22 Raptors launched into the pre-dawn sky within the span of 3 minutes. Sarah's flight was the last to lift off, climbing rapidly toward their assigned altitude and heading. The mission was underway, but the real challenge lay ahead when they encountered the unknown aircraft and their advanced electronic warfare capabilities. As they reached cruising altitude, Sarah activated her radio to check in with her flight. "Falcon flight, check in." "Falcon 2 ready," Martinez replied. "Falcon 3 ready," Roberts added. "Falcon 4 ready," Park concluded. The radio discipline was crisp and professional, but Sarah could hear the tension in her wingmen's voices. They were flying toward an encounter with an unknown adversary whose capabilities exceeded their training experience. Rodriguez's voice came through the squadron frequency as they approached the intercept area. Viper flights, radar contact with unknown aircraft bearing 270 at 120 miles. Begin intercept procedures and maintain formation integrity. Sarah's radar display showed 6 contacts arranged in the familiar hexagonal formation she had studied in her technical manuals. But as they closed the distance, something strange began to happen. The radar return started to flicker and fade, replaced by false contacts that appeared and disappeared randomly across her screen. Falcon flight, I'm seeing electronic interference on my scope. Unknown aircraft are beginning jamming procedures, Sarah reported. Martinez's voice came back immediately. Falcon 2 confirms electronic interference. My targeting computer is showing multiple false contacts. Roberts added her own observation. Falcon 3, my radar is cycling through potential targets without maintaining stable locks. The jamming is affecting automated targeting systems. Sarah recognized the signs immediately. The unknown aircraft were using the same adaptive electronic warfare techniques that Dr. Vasquez had described in the classified briefing. Their jamming was specifically designed to confuse and overwhelm the F-22's automated systems. But Sarah was prepared for this scenario. While her wingmen struggled with compromised automated systems, she began implementing the manual targeting procedures she had practiced for 2 years. Her hands moved across the cockpit controls with practiced precision, activating backup systems and engaging manual override functions. Falcon flight switched to manual targeting procedures. Do not rely on automated systems for target identification or lock-on. The next few minutes would determine whether years of preparation and study had adequately equipped them for the reality of advanced electronic warfare. Sarah could hear the frustration in her wingmen's voices as they struggled to adapt to manual procedures while flying toward an encounter with an adversary whose capabilities remained unknown. Morrison's voice came through the squadron frequency with obvious strain. Viper lead, my targeting systems are completely jammed. I can see the contacts on radar, but my computer can't maintain stable locks. Harper's flight reported similar difficulties. Phoenix flight is experiencing complete targeting system failure. We're switching to visual identification procedures. Sarah realized that she and her flight were facing the same electronic warfare that was crippling the rest of the squadron. But her manual targeting procedures were proving more effective than the automated systems that everyone else was trying to use. Viper lead, Falcon lead. I have stable contact on all 6 unknown aircraft using manual targeting procedures. My flight is maintaining effective intercept capability. Rodriguez's response carried a note of relief. Falcon lead, take tactical control of the intercept. Guide the other flights into engagement positions. For the first time in her career, Sarah found herself in tactical command of a 12 aircraft formation flying toward potential combat. Everything she had studied and practiced was about to be tested in the most demanding circumstances possible. The unknown aircraft continued their approach toward U.S. territorial waters, their electronic warfare systems creating an electromagnetic environment unlike anything American pilots had experienced before. Sarah's manual targeting procedures were working, but she understood that the real test would come when the opposing forces merged and the engagement began in earnest. As the distance closed to visual range, Sarah could see the 6 unknown aircraft ahead of them. Their configuration was unlike anything in her aircraft identification manuals, suggesting technology that exceeded known capabilities. But her manual targeting procedures continued to provide accurate tracking data, even as the automated systems of her squadron mates failed around her. The moment of truth was approaching, and Sarah Chen, the pilot who had been mocked for reading technical manuals, was about to lead American forces into the most challenging aerial engagement of the 21st century. The engagement was minutes away, and everything would depend on whether manual procedures and old-fashioned pilot skill could overcome the most advanced Electronic warfare capabilities ever deployed in aerial combat. The electromagnetic spectrum erupted into chaos as the 6 unknown aircraft unleashed their full electronic warfare capabilities. Sarah's heads-up display flickered with false targets while her radar screen became a constellation of phantom contacts that appeared and vanished. In milliseconds, the jamming was unlike anything she had studied in her technical manuals, adapting and evolving in real time as her aircraft systems attempted to compensate. Falcon Flight, maintain visual formation, Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the electronic maelstrom surrounding them. Do not trust your displays. Use backup instruments and manual procedures only. Through her canopy, she could see the 6 hostile aircraft maintaining their hexagonal formation as they approached the edge of U.S. territorial waters. Their sleek profiles were unfamiliar, suggesting technology that exceeded the capabilities of any known adversary. More concerning was the sophisticated coordination of their electronic attack, which seemed to anticipate and counter every automated response from the American formation. Martinez's voice crackled through the radio with obvious frustration. Falcon 2, my targeting computer is completely blind. I can't get a lock on anything. Falcon 3, same problem, Roberts added. The jamming is overwhelming my systems. Sarah had expected this. The unknown aircraft were using exactly the kind of adaptive electronic warfare that Dr. Vasquez had warned about. Their jamming wasn't just blocking American systems. It was learning how those systems responded and developing new countermeasures in real time. But Sarah's manual targeting procedures were proving immune to the electronic interference. While her squadron mates struggled with compromised automated systems, she was successfully tracking all 6 hostile aircraft using techniques that relied on human calculation rather than computer processing. Falcon Flight, I have positive identification on all 6 contacts, Sarah reported. Unknown aircraft are maintaining course toward territorial waters. Estimated time to boundary crossing is 12 minutes. Rodriguez's voice came through the squadron frequency with obvious strain. Falcon Lead, Viper Lead, my entire flight is experiencing complete system failure. We're switching to backup procedures, but we're not as proficient as your flight. Harper's situation was equally challenging. Phoenix Lead, Phoenix Flight. Our automated systems are useless. We're maintaining formation, but we have no targeting capability. Sarah realized that she and her flight were the only American aircraft maintaining effective combat capability against the sophisticated electronic warfare. The responsibility for the entire intercept mission now rested on her ability to execute manual targeting procedures under the most demanding circumstances possible. Viper Lead, Falcon Lead taking tactical control of intercept, Sarah announced. All flights maintain current positions and follow my lead. The transition to tactical command represented a moment that would have been unimaginable just days. Earlier, Sarah Chen, the pilot who had been dismissed for studying outdated manuals, was now leading 12 F-22 Raptors against an adversary with capabilities that exceeded American technological superiority. As the opposing formations closed to within visual range, Sarah began implementing the manual targeting procedures she had practiced thousands of times in simulation. Her eyes moved rapidly between her backup instruments, calculating range, bearing, and closure rate using geometric relationships rather than computer algorithms. Falcon 2, take high cover at Angels 35, she commanded. Falcon 3, maintain low position at Angels 25. Falcon 4, prepare for electronic spectrum analysis. Her flight responded with the precision that came from intensive training, but Sarah could hear the tension in their voices. They were flying into an engagement that would test not just their flying skills, but their ability to fight effectively when their most advanced systems were compromised. The unknown aircraft maintained their formation as they approached the 12-mile territorial limit. Sarah's manual calculations indicated they would cross into American waters within 8 minutes unless they altered course or were successfully intercepted. Unknown aircraft. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United States Air Force. You are approaching U.S. territorial waters. Identify yourself and state your intentions. The radio response came in heavily accented English. American aircraft, we are conducting routine navigation exercises in international waters. We have no hostile intentions. Sarah's training in threat assessment immediately identified several concerning elements in the response. The aircraft's approach vector was too precise for routine navigation. Their electronic warfare capabilities were too sophisticated for a training exercise. And their stealth characteristics suggested military rather than civilian purposes. Unknown aircraft, your current heading will take you into U.S. territorial waters. You must alter course immediately or be subject to interception. The response was more direct this time. American aircraft, we will maintain our current course. Any aggressive action against our formation will be considered an act of war. Rodriguez's voice cut through the tactical frequency with new urgency. Falcon Lead, NORAD, reports additional radar contacts approaching from the northwest. We may be facing a larger force than initially assessed. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical implications. If additional hostile aircraft were approaching, the intercept mission could rapidly escalate into a major air engagement. Her flight's manual targeting capabilities would be tested against multiple adversaries using advanced electronic warfare. But first, she needed to deal with the immediate threat of 6 unknown aircraft that were now less than 5 minutes from entering U.S. territorial waters. Falcon Flight Arm Weapon Systems, Sarah commanded. Prepare for defensive engagement if hostile intent is demonstrated. The mechanical sounds of missile systems activating filled the cockpits of the 4 F-22 Raptors as they prepared for potential combat. Sarah's AIM-120 MRAM missiles were ready for beyond visual range engagement, while her AIM-9 Sidewinders provided close-range capability if the situation deteriorated into a turning fight. Falcon Lead, Falcon 4, Park's voice carried new information. My spectrum analyzer is detecting active targeting radars from the unknown aircraft. They're painting us with fire control systems. Sarah's blood chilled as she processed this. Intelligence. Active targeting radars indicated that the unknown aircraft were preparing to engage American forces. The rules of engagement were clear. Defensive action was authorized when hostile intent was demonstrated. All Viper flights, unknown aircraft are actively targeting our formation. Rules of engagement authorize defensive measures. Prepare for immediate engagement. The tactical situation had suddenly escalated from intercept to combat. Sarah found herself commanding 12 F-22 Raptors in what could become the first air-to-air engagement between 5th-generation stealth fighters. Falcon Flight, execute manual targeting sequence, Sarah ordered. Engage assigned targets on my command. Her hands moved across the cockpit controls with practiced precision, activating manual override functions and engaging backup targeting systems that most pilots had never used in combat. The procedures she had memorized from technical manuals were now being executed under the ultimate stress test of actual aerial warfare. Falcon 2, target the lead aircraft, Sarah commanded. Falcon 3, take the trailing element. Falcon 4, maintain electronic surveillance and target assignment. The unknown aircraft seemed to recognize that the American formation was preparing for engagement. Their electronic warfare intensified, flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with jamming signals designed to blind American sensors and disrupt targeting systems. But Sarah's manual procedures continued to provide accurate targeting data. While automated systems throughout the squadron failed under the sophisticated electronic attack, her calculations based on visual cues and backup instruments maintained precise tracking of all hostile aircraft. Unknown aircraft, you have demonstrated hostile intent by targeting U.S. military aircraft. Alter course immediately or face defensive engagement. The response was immediate and unambiguous. American aircraft, any attack against our formation will be met with overwhelming retaliation. You are outmatched and outgunned. Sarah's tactical analysis suggested otherwise. The unknown aircraft might have superior electronic warfare capabilities, but her manual targeting procedures were providing her flight with effective engagement capability that the enemy had not anticipated. Falcon flight, execute engagement. Sequence, fire on assigned targets. The words that marked the beginning of combat came from Sarah's lips with calm precision. 4 AIM-12 OM-RAM missiles launched simultaneously from the F-22 Raptors, their rocket motors igniting in brilliant flashes as they accelerated toward the unknown aircraft. But something unprecedented happened next. Instead of the chaotic defensive maneuvering that characterized most air-to-air engagements, the hostile aircraft executed a coordinated response that demonstrated capabilities beyond anything in American tactical doctrine. The 6 unknown aircraft separated into 3 pairs, each pair maneuvering with precision that suggested either highly advanced flight control systems or pilot training that exceeded American standards. More concerning, their electronic warfare systems seemed to be actively tracking the incoming missiles and developing countermeasures in real time. Falcon flight, missile tracking appears normal, Martinez reported. But the targets are maneuvering in ways that suggest they know exactly where our missiles are. Sarah watched in fascination and growing concern as the unknown aircraft executed defensive maneuvers that seemed to anticipate the guidance systems of the American missiles. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated, and too effective to be the result of conventional defensive tactics. 2 of the IM-120 missiles lost track of their targets as the hostile aircraft executed maneuvers that exploited specific vulnerabilities in the missile guidance systems. The remaining 2 missiles continued tracking, but their targets were maneuvering in ways that would make interception difficult. Falcon lead, the enemy aircraft seem to know exactly how our missiles work, Roberts observed. They're not just evading. They're exploiting specific weaknesses in our weapon systems. Sarah realized that the unknown aircraft possessed not just advanced electronic warfare capabilities, but detailed intelligence about American weapon systems and tactics. They weren't simply superior technology. They were technology specifically designed to counter American air power. But she had one advantage that the enemy had not anticipated. Her manual targeting procedures were based on human calculation and observation rather than the automated systems that the hostile aircraft had been designed to counter. Falcon flight, switch to visual targeting, Sarah commanded. Use backup procedures for missile guidance. Do not rely on automated systems. This was the moment that would validate or disprove everything she had studied and practiced. Manual targeting procedures were theoretically immune to electronic jamming, but they had never been tested against adversaries with this level of sophistication. Sarah's hands moved across her controls as she manually guided her remaining missiles, using visual cues and backup instruments. The technique required precise timing and extensive knowledge of missile performance characteristics, but it bypassed the automated systems that the enemy was successfully jamming. Falcon 2, acquiring manual target lock, Martinez reported. Target bearing 270, range 15 miles. Closing velocity, Mach 1, 4. The manual targeting procedures that Sarah had taught her flight were proving effective even when automated systems failed. While the rest of the squadron struggled with compromised electronics, her flight maintained combat capability using techniques that the enemy had not anticipated. But the engagement was far from over. The unknown aircraft had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded American intelligence assessments, and their response to the initial missile attack suggested they were prepared for a prolonged engagement. All Viper flights, AWACS reports additional contacts approaching from multiple vectors, Rodriguez announced. Estimate 12 additional aircraft inbound from the northwest and northeast. Sarah's tactical assessment of the situation became grimmer as she processed this intelligence. The intercept mission had evolved into a major air engagement against an adversary with numerical superiority and advanced electronic warfare capabilities. But her manual targeting procedures continued to provide her flight with effective combat capability. As the first wave of missiles reached their targets, Sarah watched two of the unknown aircraft disappear from her radar scope, indicating successful interceptions. Falcon lead, Splash 2, Park reported. Confirmed destruction of hostile aircraft. Using manual targeting procedures. The successful engagement proved that manual procedures could be effective even against the most sophisticated adversaries. While automated systems throughout the squadron failed under electronic attack, Sarah's flight had successfully engaged and destroyed enemy aircraft using techniques that most pilots considered obsolete. But the victory was temporary. The surviving hostile aircraft were adapting their tactics, and the approaching reinforcements would test Sarah's manual procedures against overwhelming odds. Falcon flight, prepare for second wave engagement, Sarah commanded. Additional hostiles approaching from multiple vectors. Maintain manual targeting procedures and visual formation. The next phase of the engagement would determine whether manual targeting could overcome not just advanced electronic warfare, but numerical superiority as well. Sarah's flight of 4 F-22 Raptors would face 18 enemy aircraft in what could become the most challenging air-to-air engagement since World War II. As the second wave of enemy aircraft appeared on the horizon, Sarah felt a calm confidence that came from years of preparation and study. Her technical manuals had prepared her for exactly this scenario, and her manual targeting procedures were proving superior to the automated systems that everyone else relied upon. Falcon flight, execute dispersal pattern alpha, Sarah ordered. Maintain manual targeting and prepare for extended engagement. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when human skill and preparation overcame technological superiority. Sarah's flight engaged 18 enemy aircraft using manual procedures that had been dismissed as obsolete, proving that sometimes the oldest techniques were still the most effective. Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah's manual targeting procedures enabled her flight to successfully engage and destroy 12 additional enemy aircraft while suffering no losses of their own. The combination of superior pilot training, manual procedures, and tactical innovation overcame the enemy's electronic warfare advantage. Falcon lead, remaining hostile aircraft are withdrawing, Martinez reported. They're heading back toward international waters at high speed. Sarah's response was professional, but carried a note of quiet satisfaction. Falcon flight, cease engagement, and return to defensive positions. Mission accomplished. The engagement had ended with a decisive American victory achieved through manual targeting procedures that most pilots had never bothered to learn. Sarah's years of independent study and practice had not only vindicated her approach, but had saved American lives and demonstrated the continuing importance of fundamental flying skills. As the Viper squadron formed up for the return flight, to Nellis, Rodriguez's voice came through the radio with obvious admiration. Falcon lead, outstanding mission execution. Your manual targeting procedures proved decisive in achieving mission success. The flight back to base was quiet, with each pilot processing the implications of what they had experienced. The most advanced fighter aircraft in the world had been neutralized by sophisticated electronic warfare, but manual procedures based on fundamental flying skills had proven effective against the most advanced adversary they had ever faced. After landing, Sarah found herself surrounded by squadron mates who wanted to understand how manual targeting had succeeded where automated systems had failed. The same pilots who had mocked her for reading technical manuals were now asking detailed questions about procedures they had dismissed as obsolete. Morrison approached her as they completed their post-flight procedures. "Chen, I owe you an apology. Your manual targeting procedures saved this mission and probably saved our lives." Harper nodded in agreement. "Sarah, I have to admit that I never thought those old techniques would be relevant in modern aerial combat. Today proved me wrong." Dr. Vasquez was waiting in the debriefing room with a detailed analysis of the electronic warfare that had characterized the engagement. Her preliminary assessment confirmed that the enemy had used artificial intelligence to adapt their jamming techniques in real time, specifically targeting the vulnerabilities in automated systems. "Captain Chen, your manual targeting procedures were completely immune to the enemy's electronic warfare," Vasquez explained. "While their jamming was specifically designed to neutralize automated systems, they had no countermeasures for techniques that relied on human calculation and observation." The debriefing continued for several hours as intelligence analysts attempted to understand the capabilities that the unknown aircraft had demonstrated. But the tactical lessons were clear. Manual procedures and fundamental flying skills remained relevant even in an era of advanced technology. Rodriguez concluded the session with an announcement that would change the entire squadron's training approach. Based on today's mission results, manual targeting procedures will become mandatory. Training for all F-22 pilots. Captain Chen will lead the development of a comprehensive curriculum based on the techniques that proved so effective today. As Sarah left the debriefing room, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Years of independent study, countless hours practicing manual procedures, and the willingness to pursue knowledge that others had dismissed as irrelevant had positioned her to succeed when it mattered most. The technical manuals that had made her an outsider were now being recognized as essential knowledge for modern aerial combat. The procedures she had practiced in isolation were becoming the foundation for a new approach to pilot training that emphasized human skill over technological dependence. That evening, Sarah returned to her quarters with a profound sense of accomplishment. The engagement had validated not just her manual targeting procedures, but her entire philosophy of preparation and continuous learning. Sometimes the most important knowledge came not from the newest technology, but from understanding the fundamental principles that technology was designed to enhance. The next morning brought news that would reshape American air power doctrine. Intelligence assessments confirmed that the unknown aircraft had been using technology specifically designed to counter F-22 capabilities. The only effective response had been manual procedures that bypassed the very systems that the enemy had targeted. Sarah's approach to aerial combat, once dismissed as old-fashioned, was now being studied by tacticians throughout the Air Force. Her manual targeting techniques were being incorporated into training programs for all advanced fighter pilots, ensuring that future aviators would be prepared for the kind of sophisticated electronic warfare they had encountered. As she prepared for another day of training, Sarah understood that her role had fundamentally changed. She was no longer the squadron's technical expert who studied manuals in her spare time. She was now the architect of a new approach to aerial combat that balanced technological capability with human skill and judgment. The F-22 Raptor remained the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, but its true effectiveness now depended on pilots who understood both its automated capabilities and the manual procedures that could override those systems when necessary. Sarah Chen had proven that sometimes the strongest response to advanced technology was not more advanced technology, but deeper understanding of fundamental principles. The engagement over the Pacific Ocean would be remembered as the moment when human expertise overcame artificial intelligence, when preparation defeated innovation, and when one pilot's dedication to continuous learning changed the future of aerial combat forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.